Welcome to the Nice Girls Wear Scrubs podcast. I'm Allie,
I'm Cindy.
and we are a mother-daughter nursing duo on a mission to change the nursing narrative and unsubscribe to the typical mean girls club. Scorpios by astrology and nurses by choice, we want to share stories, create community, and give you actionable items to love your nursing career again. So let's jump into the episode. If you've ever felt like leaving a job because of the environment, you're not alone. I have left multiple jobs because of the way that they treated me or just the environment in general, for the way that they treated everyone. And I think that something we've talked about is how do we make those environments better? How do we recognize them? And what makes a good work environment versus a toxic work environment or a negative work environment? And I think something that we've both been on a journey of like finding is being more positive in general. And so I think those negative environments are really hard for us because it drags us back into that negative mindset that we don't want to be in.
Mhm.
And I think specifically for me, something that really makes a negative or toxic work environment is when people are catty or you feel like you're always in trouble. I remember telling my new manager now that like I have come from environments where I was always in trouble, always. And she was like, why would you ever be in trouble? And I'm like, I don't know, it was just the environment. And I know the way that I was raised, and this is, we were always in trouble. And so it's very triggering. And so for some people, that may not be a bad or hard thing, but for people who were always in trouble as a kid, it's a very hard environment to be in because you're just reliving that trauma that you were dealing with as a kid and into your teens. And I just think that if you're dealing with an environment that you don't feel valued or you feel is a negative
Mhm.
environment, you need to get out. And I know how I feel now. I feel a lot more like some of it has to do with me having shoulder surgery and not feeling like myself from that. But also, I think putting myself into an environment that I do feel very valued. I have managers that check in all the time and are very positive, and it's just a very good work environment where like people are happy and they like their job, and I don't feel like I'm in trouble all the time. And so I think comparing that to where I've come from in the past from some other jobs, it's very different. And so it's kind of like a culture shock for me. But I know you've been a manager before too. So kind of how does that play into how you would change an environment, or what things have you gone through in your experience in different nursing environments, because I know you have a lot less jobs than I have had.
Yeah, true. Because I was of the theory that you just stayed and stuck it out and you just stayed miserable because you weren't supposed to switch jobs. But you bring up a really great point, Allie, that you don't know where somebody came from and you don't know what their background is. So if you're dealing with everybody the same and you treat everybody like they're in trouble, a couple things are going to happen is that one, you could be triggering that person, but think about it, if that person's working in a mindset of I'm going to be in trouble, I'm going to be in trouble, they second guess themselves, they don't do the best job because they're worried about what are they going to be. That you don't bring out the best in people by having them worried about being in trouble. Now, we're in the medical field, so obviously we have to do the right things by our patients, but I don't think anybody that gets into nursing purposefully goes and harms people. Maybe there's a few, but for the general,
I was
most
gonna
people
say,
don't.
have you seen The Good Nurse? Which I
Right,
just
that's why I was
started
thinking that.
following
Yeah,
her. She's a
yeah,
really great advocate, which I
yeah,
I think is great. But yes, there
yeah,
are some people,
yeah.
but
There
the
are,
majority of
but
people don't.
yes, the majority of us do not. And so you reference management, and actually, that is one of the reasons I got into management is I don't have as many jobs as you, but I've had very toxic work environments that I didn't realize was toxic at the time. And so I got into management for that very reason. I wanted to change things for the nurses and obviously have the best patient care because that's when everything's a win-win is when you're providing the best patient care so people feel good about it, but you also have the best environment because you are exactly what you said. I love it is because people do better when they feel better, right? And
Like,
they feel valued. Everybody just wants to matter. I mean, I'm gonna reference uh oh, now I'm gonna forget his name, but Ted Lasso. It goes down to that. Everybody wants to matter. Like everybody wants to matter from every, I mean, I know we're nurses, but everybody in the entire hospital or whatever setting you work in, clinic, whatever, they all just want to feel like they matter and that they're a contributor to the team. So when we as managers or directors or CNOs get this big head and we're the end all be all, then now you've just created a punitive environment, and it's not a just culture where people can come to you when mistakes happen because of systems. I'm a big system person, that you put systems in place so that people don't fail. And I think a lot of times we fail our nurses when we don't have those systems set in place and we don't do a great job of evaluating them.
and I know the biggest mistake that I've ever made as a nurse was a medication error. And it was
Mm,
in one of those environments that was punitive. And I was so scared to say something. And it was like 2 hours before we figured out what was going on. It was medications that looked alike that ended up being in the same bin, and the patient was
mm,
on those two medications that were the same. And so even with and it was when I was on orientation, and even with the preceptor, we couldn't figure it out. And with that preceptor, I just felt like I was doing something wrong. I remember going home
mm,
and crying and being like, I know I did something wrong, but there were so many things in place that should have been fixed before I made that mistake. And we're human. I remember having this conversation a couple days ago with a patient on the phone, and we were talking about humans, and that nurses and doctors and everybody in the medical field is human, and people make mistakes. And um I think there's that thing called to err is human. And if we're in environments that are going to foster mistrust and not speaking up, and as much as a hospital can say it has just culture, it really comes down to the unit more than it comes
mm,
down to the hospital system. So that's very interesting, because it's like the one mistake I ever made was in an environment that was so negative and
mm.
so punitive. And I think you were just always scared that you were going to get in trouble or lose your license. And that doesn't foster people who want to stay for
No.
a really long time. And I think people that do stay are just in survival mode, and they're not working at their best capacity. And I feel like if you want to bring out the best in people, you as a manager or a lead or a charge nurse
Mhm.
or anyone who's in, I mean, even you as a person who's just a nurse, that's you're coming to work, you want to do the things that you can to bring out the best in people so that you have a great work environment. And I think it would benefit so many people in their job satisfaction, in retention,
Mm,
in patient care, because you would have
yeah.
your teammates backs, you would have a good teamwork environment. And so there's one unit in specific that I felt that I really had that, and that was the happiest I had ever been in nursing. And I think it came down from the management
Mhm.
and the other people too, and everybody really liked their jobs. And although I was on night shift, which I hate, I loved my job and I loved going, and I wasn't depressed, I wasn't anxious, I wasn't frustrated. And even the unit that I worked on when I traveled, they had that environment, and so many people stayed and everybody got along, and it was just so cool, and they kind of accepted me. And I would have stayed there if I wanted to keep working nights. But I just think those are the environments where people stay, and they feel very
Yeah.
valued.
It's true. And what you said is so important. It does come from the top, because what in turn happens if the top is open to hearing what's happening, then change happens. But if the top just comes down with orders, then the second in line orders the third in line. So now you have crabby charge people who don't really want to be in charge, and they're just trying. I tell you, I was in charge a long time. And the reason I was in charge for a long time is because, well, one, I'm a people pleaser. So I made sure everybody was pleased except for me. Right. And so, it just compounds. But so then there was days that I was so overwhelmed and so overworked, but I had to make it okay for everybody, that I just took it all inside of me. And then, of course, there'd be times I might lash out all of a sudden, because where does it come out? There was nobody there advocating for me at those times to be like, hey, Cindy, do you need help? Or, hey, how did that day go? Come, like, talk about it, because some of us, especially nurses, we want to talk about it and then we can kind of release it. There's that, and there's other people that don't, that just keep it inside. But if you don't know your people, then you don't know what they need and you're not bringing out the best in them. And the other thing that I've learned in having a business is that if you have a vision, and if I think back to all the visions or mission statements of the facilities, clinics, whatever I've worked with, companies in nursing that I've worked with, they don't have a vision that includes the workers. They don't have a vision that takes an account. What is our culture like? What do we create? How are we taking care of our patients and our workers, whether it be nurses or any other people in the medical profession? I mean, nurses just happen to be the largest entity. So, we have a lot of these things. And then, we just should talk about ways to change it. And one of it is through management, but we might not be able to accomplish that right yet. So where do we do it? We do it with the people on the ground. And some of the things you could do is create your own committee that, has a nice girl attitude. And I know there's men, so I'm not trying to be exclusive, but nice people
nice
attitude,
humans.
nice humans. Yes. Just be a nice human. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so you could create, call it whatever you want, but literally, how could you, I mean, there's so many gaps we need to bridge, unit to unit, shift to shift, this side to that side, nurses versus if you have LVNs or LPNs or aides or techs, or.
And there shouldn't be this, I'm
right.
better than you because I have X degree.
Yeah.
And I think that was the most valuable thing you did for me, was you told me I had to get my CNA. And I have never felt that I am above anyone. I have always felt like it's our job and it's a team.
Yes.
And I, even with other nurses, younger staff, older staff, different specialties. I work with a lot of medical assistants now, and I know there are nurses who are so mean to medical assistants. And I remember talking to one of them on my orientation, and I was like, I just don't really understand. Like, we're all here for the patients, and we're all like, why is it an us versus them? Or like, why does a different degree make someone better or worse? That makes no sense. It's just whatever somebody went into for whatever their life was, and whatever they could do. They're all here to help the people that we're helping. And I've never understood this, I'm better than you, which is probably why I didn't get along very well in most of the adult ICUs. Or like, I am an XYZ type of nurse and that makes me smarter, better, anything than you. And it was very interesting because I made a post about bullying and like leaving jobs because of, these type of environments or bullying, and a lot of people wrote like, why is it that nursing has so much bullying in it? And I do remember, even when I was in school in 2014, it was still very nurses eat your young. You said it since before I started nursing school. And is it because we're a female dominated profession? Is it supposedly a lot of physicians are like that way too? So what in the medical field causes so many people to be a bully or be bullied? I don't know. I don't know what the answer is, and I don't know what we can do to change it, other than everybody just needs to be a nice person. And I've made videos about this before, and it was very general about people being nice, and people took it not the right way. But it's not calling people out. It's really calling people in to be nice.
Behaviors.
If you're spending 40 hours a week with people, or even 36 hours a week with people, why do you want to be miserable the whole time? Why would you want to spend that much? And why would anyone want to stay in an environment where they feel like it's miserable?
Yep.
And so I think that's why so many people leave.
Right. We have a exorbitant amount of young nurses leaving the workforce right now. And I was on just a reach out in social media talking to another nurse, and she had a lot of really mean things to say. Like, I just think we need to stop assuming, and you wonder where it comes from. The reality is nursing doesn't have a great historical past. I mean, if you think about it, we did great things, but Florence Nightingale got women of the night, hookers, whatever you want to call them. That's who her nurses that she trained originally were. You know, before she started the school and before she, made it something into something more. But so you think about that, that's a negative connotation to begin with. Our profession wasn't seen as admirable or a hero or any of that.
It's
And
also very interesting that the only nurse that that's a claim
oh,
to fame is white as well. And we don't
correct.
even acknowledge any nurses of color or anything. And that's a
Yeah,
whole different
yeah,
topic
yeah,
that
yeah,
people don't want to
yeah.
talk about.
Right. Yeah, exactly. It's so true. Because I do think it became a predominantly white female profession because of the stereotypical track we were pigeonholed into. I mean, I'll tell you, like, I might have wanted to been a doctor, but really, before I became a nurse, but that wasn't really talked about an option for me, and I'm not even super old, but think about the people older than me, what they went into. So you went into this profession with probably a chip on your shoulder because it was a negative profession. And then doctors were revered and put on pedestals. And then we were looked down on from them. Things have evolved so much. When I first started, if you didn't give the chair up to the doctor that walked in the room, the minute they walked in the room, you were in trouble. You got written up. You could get fired. I had doctors talk about great environments, though. I did have a doctor one time. I had a patient that had arrested, and he was a very, very restless patient. So he had pulled himself off all his monitors. I had two other patients. I was only supposed to have two, but I had three. And I was in another patient's room. Nobody went to help. And so I heard something crash. I go into that room and he's arrested. So we call code and stuff. I was pregnant with my second child. And at the end of that, we got him back and everything, but we didn't have the EKG strip that showed, like, did he go into asystole? Did he go into VTAC? Like, what did he do? Because we were doing CPR by the time we got him back on the monitor. And that doctor came in the morning, and instead of like asking me what happened or the situation, man, he ripped into me. And I think I went home and cried. And then the funny part is, like, well, it's not really funny. It's pretty egregious, but everybody started like talking about me, that I was going to get sued and the family's going to sue. But I had a manager that brought me in the office. She talked to me and she said, that doctor will write you an apology letter. And he did. And so my manager stood up for me because the situation happened. Should it have not happened? Maybe not. But like you said earlier, humans are humans. And if somebody's DTing, like, having delirium tremens, or they're or detoxing or something like that, sometimes you can't control all their behavior. I can't, as one nurse with three patients in critical setting, cannot control, everybody's behavior. So then now we're going to make a judgment on that nurse. Oh, he didn't take care of them right. But it's because we're afraid. We're afraid that that could happen to us. And so everybody works in the environment afraid of something else. We need to make it more empowering. We need to be able to go to our leaders, to our charge nurse, to whoever. But when you bring it, you also have to bring it in a positive life with maybe some solution. If everybody's always complaining, then it's going to continue to be negative. And so there's so many things we can do. We are a large field force that if we band together and start talking about this stuff and creating not a corporate organized committee, but create your own group and support each other and intermingle into different floors so that you could get to know. You had also said something about, oh, I'm an ER nurse, like I'm better. You're an ICU nurse, you're better. Like,
Or all the
no.
memes of the CDICU nurses being like, well,
Oh,
I'm a CDICU nurse. I'm the
yeah.
best.
Right, exactly. Like, well, and we in the ER, we got some, like, like we run circles around you. No, we put our IVs wherever we can find them, and you just have to worry about it when you get them. You have no idea what I go through. And I think that we need to be more understanding, because as much as you don't know what I go through, I don't know what you go through. And if we were all understanding, then it would make a better outcome and we can meet each other because quite
And
frankly,
we need nurses in
there's
every part of everything. If
Yeah.
everybody was a CVICU nurse, there would be no primary care nurses or any other type of nurses. So we
Right.
need nurses everywhere. It does
Everywhere.
not make anyone
Yep.
better or worse than anyone
Worse.
else. And I think
Nope.
something that you said earlier is we're operating from fear.
Yep.
And I
Mhm.
think a lot of times instead of teamwork, so like instead of somebody helping you when you had those 3 patients, right?
Mhm.
Everybody else is so scared or so like, well, I don't want that to happen to me.
Yeah.
So they don't go help or they don't offer
Right.
and they just throw people under the bus. And I think that's an environment that
Right.
causes it to be quote unquote toxic or negative.
Right.
And I think if
Exactly.
you just went into work every day and asked yourself, like, how can I be a good teammate? So
Mhm.
just like if you were on a team sport, nursing
Yeah.
isn't an individual thing. It's a team profession. And although we don't do a lot of team nursing anymore, it really is team nursing. And you should ask your coworkers if they need help, if they need a break. Like, if you notice somebody's having a hard time, the easiest thing that you can do is just ask them, like, hey, how are you doing? And if
Right.
somebody lashes out or normally doesn't lash out or normally is very quiet and is like really upset or, at their breaking point, then there's probably something going on with them and it probably has nothing to do with you. And I
Yeah.
think if we just realize that we're all humans going through things and that we can't just, as much as we want to try to shut it off for work, it's not always going to be shut off. And I think that's something that my one job that was probably one of the best environments I've worked in, I think it was when I was going through my divorce, and that manager was like, take the time off. And when I came
Mm.
back, everybody checked in and they
Mhm.
made sure I was okay. And it was just such a great environment to have that happen in because I think if I would have gone through that in any other environment, other than the one I'm in currently, I don't think I would have made it through, and I don't think I would have continued to work there, and the only reason why I left that environment was because I moved, and, um, I just think it's so important to, like, treat your coworkers like humans because everybody has things going on, and there's just
Right. Yeah,
you can't
because
be perfect.
right. And nobody's perfect and everybody wants to matter. And any given day, somebody could have something going on, and we need to band together to make this profession last. And I think that management and people in administration need to take care of nurses because nurses aren't going to take care of people anymore if we continue down the road we're going.
Mhm, I agree. Our mission with this podcast is to create a community of nurses who want to change the field from the inside out. If this podcast resonated with you, make sure you like and subscribe wherever you are listening to this podcast. It helps you stay up to date with future podcast episodes, and it also makes sure we create a large community of nurses who want to change the field.